Whether relations are with the West or the East, what matters most is not who feels comfortable, but who we are accountable to. We don't need to please the West or please the East. We please ourselves. That statement captures the mood behind a recent meeting that raised eyebrows far beyond Africa. When Iran's defense minister described Africa as central to his country's strategic vision, and Burkina Faso responded with language centered on sovereignty, resistance, and autonomy, some observers dismissed it as routine diplomacy. Others saw a warning sign. But for many young Africans watching closely, it felt like something else, a signal. Because Iran is not on good terms with Western powers. Decades of sanctions, nuclear disputes, economic isolation, and confrontation with the United States and parts of Europe define its modern geopolitical identity. So when Burkina Faso, a country in the volatile Sahel region, expands defense discussions with Tehran, the question is not whether it is controversial. The real question is, why now? Is this a reckless alignment in an already fragile region? Or is the Sahel quietly learning how to negotiate power in a world no longer controlled by a single center? To understand why Burkina Faso would sit down in Tehran at this moment, we first need to understand what Iran represents in today's global system. Iran is not simply expanding diplomacy like any ordinary state. It is a country that has survived under sustained sanctions, financial restrictions, and strategic isolation for decades. The collapse of the 2015 nuclear agreement, renewed U.S. sanctions, frozen assets, and restricted oil exports reshaped its economic and military posture. Yet Iran did not collapse. Instead, it adapted. When access to global banking systems tightened, it experimented with alternative financial channels. When arms imports became uncertain, it expanded domestic defense production. When political isolation increased, it deepened ties with states' will. But this is where many misunderstand the shift. This is not about Burkina Faso becoming anti-Western. It is about Burkina Faso refusing to remain Western-dependent. And there is a difference. For years, security in the Sahel relied heavily on Western partnerships. France conducted operations such as Serval and Barkhane across Mali and neighboring states. The United States established drone infrastructure in Niger. The European Union launched training and stabilization missions. Billions were spent. Strategies were drafted. Conferences were held. Yet insecurity persisted. Armed groups adapted faster than counterinsurgency manuals. Rural communities saw soldiers rotate in and out while violence remained. Displacement rose quietly. Trust between governments and citizens weakened. This is not ideology. It is observable reality. When a security model produces similar outcomes year after year, rational actors begin reassessing it. That reassessment created political shifts. Coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger were not isolated lightning strikes. They reflected accumulated frustration, not only with governance failures, but with externally anchored security systems that appeared unable to deliver lasting stability. Sanctions followed. Diplomatic pressure intensified. In 2023, ECOWAS even threatened military action against Niger. That moment mattered. Instead of folding inward, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger formed the Alliance of Sahel States, a mutual defense pact designed to respond collectively if one member is attacked. This was the real break. The Sahel stopped assuming its security future would be managed primarily through Western structures. It began constructing its own framework. That psychological pivot matters more than any single foreign meeting. Once regional cohesion strengthens, diversification becomes less risky. You're not negotiating alone. You're negotiating as part of a bloc. So when Burkina Faso expands talks with Iran, it does so after building. Now consider Iran's perspective. After Washington withdrew from a nuclear agreement and sanctions tightened, Iran adjusted its economic and military strategies. It invested in domestic production, strengthened asymmetric defense capabilities, and expanded non-Western partnerships. For Burkina Faso, facing diplomatic strain and redefining alliances, Observing a sanctioned state that continues operating independently has practical relevance. This is not ideological alignment. It is strategic curiosity. Learning from someone's survival does not mean inheriting their conflicts. Burkina Faso is not importing Iran's disputes with the West. It is studying how a state functions when conventional partnerships tighten. And here lies the key. Diversification is not dependency. If Burkina Faso relied exclusively on Iran, that would signal a new form of vulnerability. But what we see instead is broader outreach, regional coordination through the Sahel alliance, engagement with non-Western actors, and continued diplomatic navigation globally. Iran becomes one node in a wider network. In network logic, nodes increase resilience. We now live in a multipolar world. The United States remains powerful. Europe remains economically influential. But Russia projects force. China expands infrastructure and trade routes. Turkey exports defense technology. Gulf states expand investments. Iran widens diplomatic lanes in the global south. When only one door exists, you wait outside it. When several doors exist, you negotiate at all of them. That is multipolar leverage. But multipolarity is not automatically liberating. It is demanding. Smaller states must exercise discipline. Competition among major powers can easily turn regions into arenas rather than actors. Africa knows this history well. During the Cold War, alignment often came with conditions. Sovereignty became entangled in proxy rivalries. Today's environment is different, but the risk remains. If diversification becomes careless. So how does a Sahel state extract advantage without surrendering agency? 3 guardrails are essential. First, no exclusive security pipeline. No single external actor should control training, equipment, and intelligence simultaneously. Second, regional anchoring must remain operational, not symbolic. Internal cohesion is the best counterweight to external pressure. Third, transparency of interest. Every external actor pursues strategic goals. Recognizing this prevents romantic illusions. Iran seeks diplomatic expansion beyond Western isolation. That is rational. Burkina Faso seeks diversified security channels amid uncertainty. That is also rational. The danger appears only when rational calculation becomes emotional alignment. Multipolar politics rewards cold thinking. There is also a narrative battlefield unfolding. Notice how quickly phrases like Iran expanding influence in Africa appear in headlines. Compare that to how Western military expansion in Africa has historically been framed: stabilization, partnership, counterterrorism support. Language shapes perception. When Burkina Faso meets Western officials, it is described as cooperation. When it meets Iran, it becomes alignment. The distinction is subtle but powerful. Narrative framing affects financial access, diplomatic recognition, and domestic legitimacy. So expanding defense talks with a sanctioned state is not just a security decision. It is a communication decision. But narrative loops can become dangerous. If Western policymakers interpret diversification as hostility, they may respond with financial tightening or diplomatic pressure. That response reinforces the Sahel's argument that external systems are coercive. Polarization deepens. Burkina Faso's strength lies in avoiding that trap. The youth in the Sahel are not evaluating speeches. They are evaluating outcomes, security improvements, economic breathing space, visible sovereignty, and decision-making. In the end, none of this will be done. It will be decided in villages across Burkina Faso. Do armed groups lose territory? Are soldiers better trained? Do supply chains function without political interruption? Can economic pressure be absorbed without panic? That is where sovereignty becomes real. The meeting with Iran is a signal. The alliance of Sahel states is a framework. Western discomfort is a reaction. But signals and reactions are not outcomes. Multipolar engagement offers opportunity, not guarantees. What makes this moment historically significant is not Iran's outreach or Western concern. It is the fact that African states are asserting optionality openly. For generations, Africa's security architecture was largely designed externally and implemented locally. Today, parts of the Sahel are attempting to reverse that flow. Design locally, negotiate externally. That experiment will succeed only if internal discipline matches external ambition. Sovereignty is not a speech in Tehran. It is the ability to reject unfavorable terms without collapsing. It is negotiating from multiple directions without surrendering decision-making. It is withstanding pressure without scrambling. A quiet test is approaching. If Western powers adapt and offer more equal partnerships, the Sahel's leverage increases. If pressure intensifies to discourage diversification, resilience will be tested. Either way, the era of single-lane dependency appears to be closing. The next chapter will not be written by which foreign flag appears in a photograph. It will be written by whether Burkina Faso becomes harder to coerce year after year. So the final question does not belong to Iran or the West. Can the Sahel convert this moment of strategic experimentation into a durable model of self-directed power? Or will external rivalries once again define its trajectory? That answer will not be decided in diplomatic halls. It will be decided on the ground, in security metrics, economic stability, and institutional strength. And that is where the real story begins.